Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good evening. I'm Dengku Susilawati Pengiran Haji Sabri. Tonight in Primetime Asia, Japan has decided to impose more sanctions against North Korea following the country's launch of what it called a satellite-carrying rocket last Sunday. The launch is seen by the international community as a long-range ballistic missile test. A set of tougher sanctions was approved at a ministerial meeting of the National Security Council headed by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The sanctions include a ban on all North Korean vessels from entering Japanese ports, even for humanitarian purposes. The entry ban will apply to ships from third countries that have visited ports in North Korea. Also, in regard to the latest North Korean rocket launch, key ally China is wary that instability could unleash a wave of refugees flooding across its border. The rocket launched by North Korea at the weekend seemed more powerful than its 2012 predecessor, but Pyongyang still lacks the expertise to transform it into a ballistic missile capable of reaching the U.S. mainland South Korea. In Taiwan, meanwhile, almost $1 million in assets belonging to the developer and 3 associates of a building in Taiwan fell by an earthquake will be seized. Rescuers are still digging through the rubble of the toppled Weiguan apartment complex in the southern city of Tainan, which collapsed during Saturday's quake. 30 residents remain missing and the death toll has climbed to 94. Pictures of the ruins also showed tin cans and foam were used as fillers in the concrete, exacerbating public anger over the latest safety scandal to hit the island. Kartini Knox has the details and more.
The Japanese parliament has adopted a resolution condemning North Korea's rocket launch and vowed to impose stronger sanctions against Pyongyang. North Korea's launch of a long-range rocket carrying what it called a satellite last Sunday drew renewed international condemnation just weeks after it carried out a nuclear weapon test. Critics of the rocket program say it's being used to test technology for a long-range missile. Japan eased some sanctions on North Korea in July 2014 in return for Pyongyang reopening its probe into the fate of Japanese citizens abducted decades ago by North Korean agents to help train spies, although little progress has been seen since. Pyongyang admitted in 2002 to kidnapping 13 Japanese citizens decades before. 5 abductees and their families later returned to Japan, but Tokyo wants to know the fate of the remaining 8, who Pyongyang has said are dead, and of others Japan believes were also kidnapped. Japan also vowed to lead the push for strong sanctions in the UN Security Council against North Korea in the hope it will work as a stronger curb on Pyongyang's nuclear and missile programs. Allies of the United States agree that an impactful response is needed following a rocket launch in North Korea over the weekend. The Pentagon confirmed that it will start formal talks with South Korea on deploying an advanced missile defense system to South Korea to counter the growing threat of North Korea's weapon capabilities after its rocket launch this weekend. U.S. military officials have said the sophisticated system, called Terminal High Altitude Area Defense (THAAD), was needed in South Korea. South Korea said it and the United States would begin talks on the THAAD after North Korea launched a long-range rocket earlier, carrying what it has called a satellite. North Korea says it put a satellite into orbit on Sunday, but the United States and its allies see the launch as a cover for Pyongyang's development of ballistic missile technology that could be used to deliver a nuclear weapon. Following the latest North Korean rocket launch, key ally China is wary that instability could unleash a wave of refugees flooding across its border. The rocket launched by North Korea at the weekend seemed more powerful than its 2012 predecessor, but Pyongyang still lacks the expertise to transform it into a ballistic missile capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. The comments came as leaders of South Korea, the United States and Japan discussed how to punish the North for its latest defiant launch and nuclear test, eyeing strong and effective UN sanctions. The rocket, carrying an Earth observation satellite, blasted off on Sunday and, according to North Korean state TV, achieved orbit within 10 minutes. The launch, which violated multiple UN resolutions, was widely seen as an act of open defiance, just weeks after Pyongyang carried out its 4th nuclear test. It sparked strong international condemnations and resulted in an agreement at the UN Security Council to move quickly to impose new sanctions. A South Korean Defense Ministry official said the latest rocket was similar to the UNHA-3 launched in December 2012, but was believed to have an enhanced range of some 12,000 kilometers. The older version of the rocket had an estimated range of some 10,000 kilometers. South Korean President Park Geun-hye meanwhile spoke to U.S. counterpart Barack Obama as part of a flurry of diplomatic activity aimed at agreeing on how best to censure the North. Park and Obama agreed to cooperate to make sure that the UN Security Council can adopt a resolution for strong and effective sanctions. A 6.7 magnitude earthquake hit southern Taiwan last week, damaging several buildings, with at least one building collapsing and more than 200 residents trapped. Rescuers saved 127 people from a 17-story collapsed building in Tainan City. More than 200 people are believed to have been living inside the high-rise building. Rescuers have saved more than 160 people in all after the quake, with 2 losing signs of life. The earthquake hit Kaohsiung of Taiwan at a depth of 15 kilometers at around 4 o'clock in the morning last Saturday. The epicenter was monitored at 22.94 degrees north latitude and 120.54 degrees east longitude. According to the island's Weather and Earthquake Monitoring Agency, the earthquake, with a depth of 16.7 kilometers, was centered about 27 kilometers northeast of Pingtung County seat. More than 210 people have been pulled from the 16-story Wei Kwan building, the only high-rise in the southern city of Tainan to crumble completely when the quake struck, killing more than 40 people. Use of heavy machinery had been repeatedly delayed after rescuers detected signs of life in upper parts of the toppled structure. More than 100 people are believed to be under the debris, and many are trapped at the bottom of the building. The developer of a Taiwan apartment complex that collapsed during a strong earthquake has been arrested as rescuers reported hearing signs of life in the rubble, where some 100 people are still trapped following the February 10th earthquake. Prosecutors in the southern city of Tainan have launched an investigation into the disaster after photos showed cans and foam had been used to fill parts of the complex's concrete framework. Around 40 people have been confirmed dead and scores are still missing after the collapse of the 16-story Wei Kwan building. The court hearing came as the 72-hour golden window for finding survivors expired. It was the only high-rise in the southern city of Tainan to crumble completely when the 6.7 magnitude quake struck before dawn Saturday. However, Tainan Mayor William Lai offered fresh hope of more survivors. More than 210 people have already been rescued, including an 8-year-old girl and 3 others pulled from the rubble. But hopes were dimming for some relatives of the missing. Distraught relatives repeatedly interrupted the mayor's briefing, complaining they had to wait for information from the media rather than being informed directly. The weekend quake struck 2 days before Lunar New Year, when many people would have been visiting relatives for the biggest celebration of the Chinese calendar. Taiwan lies near the junction of 2 tectonic plates and is regularly hit by earthquakes. The island's worst tremor in recent decades was a 7.6 magnitude quake in September 1999 that killed around 2,400 people.
Welcome back. Relatives of 49 inmates slaughtered in a fiery Mexican prison brawl sobbed and fainted as they read the list of victims on a wall after the country's deadliest jailhouse riot in years. Thursday's battle involved 2 rival factions of the Zetas drug cartel fighting for control of the prison in the northern industrial city of Monterrey. Also in Mexico, Argentine forensic experts have announced there is no evidence so far to back government claims that 43 missing trainee teachers were incinerated at a garbage dump in violence-ravaged Guerrero state. From Hong Kong this week, police have to disperse crowds after clashes erupted when authorities tried to move illegal street vendors from a working-class district. Hospitals in India have dealt with long queues and hours of waiting for specialist treatment, and it might not be available at all in some places due to a lack of doctors. India's top private hospitals are now seizing on the shortage by expanding into the remote management of intensive care units around the country. In Japan, a group of researchers are planning to set sail on primitive boats to help find out how humans travel from Taiwan to the southern Japanese islands, and Japan recently hosted the international snowball fights in Niigata Prefecture. Kartini Knox has the details.
Argentine forensic experts have announced there is no evidence so far to back Mexican government claims that 43 missing trainee teachers were incinerated at a garbage dump in violence-ravaged Guerrero state. In their investigations, the Argentine Forensic Anthropology Team, EAAF, which has been working to identify remains, detailed numerous problems with the government's handling of the case as well as the conclusions it has already drawn. Last year, Mexico's former Attorney General, Jesus Murillo, said there was no doubt that the students were murdered and their remains incinerated and dumped into a river in the nearby town of Cocula. The findings were welcomed by family members of the missing students. They feel the EAF's conclusions vindicate their own rejection of the government's version of events. Mexico's current Attorney General, Arely Gomez, has requested a new investigation into the Cocula rubbish dump after the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights also rejected the Mexican government's findings. But a legal representative for family members of the missing said a third report was not necessary and called on authorities to pursue new lines of investigation. The apparent massacre of the poor rural students continues to pose problems for Peña Nieto, who took office in 2012, vowing to stamp out years of drug-related violence. He was criticized for his handling of the crisis and accused of trying to wrap up the case without a thorough investigation. Riot police used batons and pepper spray early this week to disperse crowds after clashes erupted when authorities tried to move illegal street vendors from a working-class district, the worst street violence since pro-democracy protests in late 2014. Protesters hurled bricks at police as scuffles broke out, while other demonstrators set fire to rubbish bins in the streets of Mongkok, a gritty neighbourhood just across the harbour from the heart of the Asian financial centre. Police fired 2 shots into the air, a police spokeswoman said, amid chaotic scenes. Rubbish bins, chunks of brick and broken bottles lay scattered along the world-famous Nathan Road shopping strip. The clashes broke out after police moved in to clear hawkers or illegal vendors who sell local delicacies, trinkets and household goods from makeshift street-side stalls. The underground train station for Mongkok, a bustling shopping district packed with street markets, shops and high-rise residential buildings, was closed temporarily. A police statement said 3 men aged 27 to 35 were arrested for assaulting a police officer and obstructing police, while 3 police officers received hospital treatment. Broadcaster RTHK said later that 24 people had been arrested. The narrow streets in and around Mongkok were the scene of some of the most violent clashes during protests in late 2014 to demand greater democracy in the former British colony that returned to Beijing rule in 1997. The clashes in December 2014 came when authorities cleared the last of pro-democracy demonstrators from the streets after more than 2 months of occasionally violent protests that had posed one of Beijing's greatest political challenges in decades. Long queues and hours of waiting are common at India's hospitals. And when it comes to specialist treatment, it might not be available at all in some places due to a lack of doctors. India's top private hospitals are now seizing on a shortage of critical care doctors and expanding into the remote management of intensive care units around the country. India has 7 doctors for every 10,000 people, half the global average, according to the World Health Organization. Data from the Indian Medical Association shows the country needs more than 50,000 critical care specialists, but has just 8,350. Such a shortage of doctors means small facilities in India's $55 billion private hospital market are ill-equipped to provide critical care, even as numbers seeking private health care rise because the public health system is in even worse shape. And this is where remote specialist healthcare is stepping in to fill the gap. Apollo, which monitors 200 patients in 6 states from its own electronic intensive care unit, or EICU, in Hyderabad city, will open 3 new centres to track 1,000 more patients. India's EICU beds will expand by 15 to 20% each year from about 3,000 at present. At the remote intensive care unit of Fortis Escorts Hospital in New Delhi, Dr. Shamit Gupta and his team watch a wall of monitors displaying the vital signs of intensive care patients admitted hundreds of kilometres away. They are now monitoring about 350 patients remotely from the command centre, and that number is due to expand to about 500 patients by the end of the year. Doctors say it's a win-win situation for the big chains like Fortis and Apollo, which provide the remote monitoring facilities, and also for the smaller hospitals in remote towns, which can have access to expert advice and round-the-clock monitoring at a relatively marginal cost. Hospital operators charge between $10 and $30 per day to virtually monitor a patient from their eICUs, with revenues shared between hospitals and healthcare software providers, such as General Electric and Philips. A group of researchers in Japan are planning to set sail on primitive boats to help find out how humans travelled from Taiwan to the southern Japanese islands 30,000 years ago. The group of about 30 anthropologists, archaeologists and adventurers disclosed the plan. The group says distant ancestors of Japanese people began inhabiting islands in what is today's Okinawa Prefecture in the Paleolithic period. They are believed to have crossed the sea from Taiwan, which was part of the Chinese continent at the time. However, what kinds of boats they used remains a mystery. No archaeological findings have suggested that they had tools for woodwork. Group members think that ancient people may have used boats made of bundled grass or bamboo rafts. The members will produce such vessels and make a 75-kilometre journey from Yonaguni Island to Iramote Island, both in Okinawa, this July. Group leader Yosuke Kaifu of the National Museum of Nature and Science said they want to solve the big mystery of how humans invented boats and sailed across the sea. Finally, in Japan, about 1,000 people took part in a snowball fight in an international competition in Nunomo City, Niigata Prefecture. More than 200 groups entered this year's event. Among them were people from Indonesia, India and Germany. Each team was made up of 5 members. The rules are simple. Male competitors are eliminated once they're hit by snowballs 3 times and females 5 times. If a team leader is eliminated, the opposing team automatically wins. The one with the most survivors at the end of the 3-minute match is declared the victor. A team of college students from Tokyo won the costume award for their outfits as film characters.
And that's it for this week's Primetime Asia. We'll be back at the same time next week with more news and features from the Asia-Pacific region. For more news, you can visit our website at www.rtbnews.rtb.gov.bn. I'm Dianku Susilawati Pengiran Haji Sabri, wishing you a good week ahead and good night. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.